The first time my future mother-in-law tried to sabotage my wedding, she did it with a smile and a stack of ivory envelopes that smelled faintly of lavender and expensive stationery. My name is Emily and I am 23 years old. Savannah, Georgia, is a city made of soft shadows and slow mornings, where the river moves like a secret and the old oaks bend protectively over cobblestone streets. I grew up here in a quiet corner of town where front porches mattered and neighbors memorized each other's birthdays. Life was never loud or dramatic for me. It was steady, predictable, almost painfully ordinary. Then I met Daniel. He was 26 when our paths crossed at a charity 5K run I hadn't even wanted to volunteer for. He was sweaty, annoyed, and apologizing profusely for splashing water onto my sneakers. Somehow that awkward moment turned into a conversation, then a date, then a life. Daniel was calm where I was anxious, thoughtful where I was impulsive. The kind of man who checked weather updates before dinner reservations and organized his tool drawer by size. He proposed on a sleepy Sunday morning, barefoot, with pancake batter on his arm and the ring hidden inside a coffee mug. I cried before I even said yes. Not because of the ring, but because I felt for the first time in a long time that my life was expanding into something bigger than I had ever dared to expect. But I didn't just get Daniel when I said yes. I got his mother too. Her name is Ellen. And Ellen is the kind of woman who lives inside quotation marks. Elegant. Accomplished. Impressive. People say those words like offerings at her feet. She runs a luxury real estate agency outside Atlanta and always wears tailored blouses that look like they've never known the touch of a wrinkle. She moves through the world with the quiet confidence of someone who has never once been told no. The first time she met me, she looked me up and down with the polite curiosity of someone assessing a vase she wasn't sure belonged in her living room. "You're Emily," she said. Not warmly. Not unkindly. Just factually. I hoped our relationship would soften once she realized I made her son happy. I imagined late-night wedding planning conversations, shared laughter, maybe even a bond that would feel like the mother I lost when I was 10. But the day she showed up with the envelopes was the day I understood exactly what I was up against. She entered our apartment without knocking, her signature greeting, and set a decorative box on the kitchen island like she was placing a crown on velvet. "I took care of the invitations for you," she announced. Daniel emerged from the bedroom mid-button, confusion already settling in his eyes. "Invitations?" I repeated slowly. "We haven't finalized anything yet." "Oh, that's handled," she said, waving a manicured hand. "Your list was a bit cluttered. I streamlined it. Used my stationer. High-quality work." A cold knot tightened in my stomach. I opened an envelope. The date printed inside was wrong. Not a typo. Not a small mistake. A different date entirely. 1 week earlier. "Ellen," I whispered, "this isn't our wedding date." "It's the better date," she replied simply. "Your original choice didn't work for several important people. The club had an opening. The pastor was free. Everything aligned beautifully. Really, you should be thanking me." Daniel stepped forward. "Mom, you can't just change our wedding date." She smiled. A soft, pitying smile I would one day learn to dread. "Oh, Danny. Sweetheart. Weddings are complicated. You two are young. You don't understand how these things work yet." But I understood perfectly. She hadn't changed the date because it was convenient. She had changed it because she could. Because she wanted to control it. Control me. As I held the thick paper invitation between my fingers, I felt something shift deep in my chest. A small crack forming, the first hint of a fissure that would later split my world open. This was supposed to be my wedding. But in Ellen's mind, I was merely the girl marrying her son. A guest in my own story. And I had no idea then just how far she was willing to go to make sure I remembered that. I used to think the phrase mother-in-law from hell was a lazy joke from old sitcoms. The kind of thing people exaggerated for laughs. An overbearing woman with too much perfume, meddling in her son's life, offering unsolicited casserole recipes and criticism in equal measure. I didn't expect it to be my real life. I didn't expect it to feel less like a joke and more like a slow, careful erasure. Growing up, I never had a model for what a normal mother-daughter relationship looked like. My mom died when I was 10 after a short, brutal illness that turned our small house into a place filled with whispers and antiseptic. One day she was there, moving through the kitchen in her worn-out slippers, humming along to the radio as she packed my lunch. A few months later she wasn't. My dad is a good man. A quiet one. The kind who shows love with action, not words. He fixed my bike when I crashed it into the mailbox. He drove me to every school event, even if he didn't always stay for the whole thing. He taught me how to check my oil, file my taxes, and never sign anything until you've read the fine print twice. But there were spaces he couldn't reach. Dresses and prom hair and whispered secrets over cups of tea. My teenage years had a mother-shaped outline around them, a permanent absence I learned to step around carefully. So when I met Daniel's mother, some naive part of me thought maybe, just maybe, that empty outline might finally be filled. The first time Daniel took me to meet her, we drove 3.5 hours up to the suburb outside Atlanta where she lived. I remember obsessing over what to wear, changing outfits 3 times until I settled on a soft blue dress that felt like I was trying but not too hard. I baked lemon cookies the night before because my dad had told me once that bringing something when you're a guest is what decent people do. I carried those cookies into her spotless foyer like an offering. Ellen opened the door wearing a crisp white blouse and black pants. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, not a strand out of place. She looked like she had stepped out of a catalog for successful women over 50, who wake up at 5 to do yoga and close business deals before breakfast. Her eyes scanned me quickly head to toe. Not cruelly. Just clinically. "You must be Emily," she said. No hug. No warmth. Just that assessing gaze. "You're younger than I expected." I held out the container of cookies like a shield. "I, made these. Lemon. My mom used to." I stopped myself. "I hope you like them." She took them from me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "How thoughtful," she said. "We try not to keep too many sweets in the house, but I'm sure Daniel will enjoy them." Then she turned and walked away, already calling out for him. Not we. Not I. Daniel. We had dinner at her polished dining table, the kind that looks like no one ever actually uses it. The conversation felt like a job interview I hadn't been told about beforehand. "So, Emily," she began, slicing her chicken with small, precise movements. "You're in school." "Yes, ma'am," I said. "Marketing. I'm finishing my last year at Savannah State." "And you work at a bakery, is that right?" I relaxed a little, thinking this was safe ground. "Yes. I actually help with their social media as well and some of their seasonal campaigns. It's been good experience." She dabbed the corner of her mouth with her napkin. "And what are your long-term plans?" There was a way she said it that made it sound less like curiosity and more like a test I could fail. I glanced at Daniel, who gave me an encouraging look. "I'd like to work with small businesses," I said carefully. "Help bridge the gap between old-fashioned shops and more modern marketing. Especially in towns like Savannah." She nodded slowly, like she was mentally awarding me a B-. "Well," she said, "it's good to have goals. Just be sure you don't get so caught up in creative dreams that you forget practical realities. Youth doesn't last forever." "I don't think Emily is in danger of that," Daniel said lightly. "She works harder than anyone I know." She smiled at him then, genuinely. It transformed her face completely. That smile was warm. Proud. Soft. I realized in that moment that the version of Ellen I had met so far was not the version Daniel grew up with. He'd had access to a different woman. One who tucked him in at night and showed up to school events and grilled his girlfriends in high school because she just wanted what was best for him. Part of me envied him. The other part wanted to run. On the drive home after that first visit, Daniel asked me what I thought. "She's impressive," I said diplomatically. He laughed. "That's one word for it." "I think she cares about you a lot," I added. That part was undeniably true. Everything in her house, from the framed photos to the conversation, revolved around him like he was the sun and she was a planet that never quite broke orbit. "She does," he said, his face softening. "She just has strong opinions about everything. You get used to it." I wasn't sure I wanted to get used to it. When we got engaged a year later, we called her together on speakerphone. I still remember the way my heart pounded in my throat as the phone rang. I wanted her approval more than I wanted to admit. When she answered, Daniel didn't waste any time. "Hey Mom. I wanted to tell you some news. I asked Emily to marry me." There was a beat of silence. Then another. Finally she said, "I see." I held my breath. "Congratulations," she added after a moment. "That's fast." We had been together for over 2 years. It didn't feel fast to us. It felt like the natural next step in a story we were already writing together. Mom, Daniel said, frowning, we've talked about this. I know, she replied. Of course I'm happy if you're happy. I just hope you've both thought it through. Marriage is not something you can easily undo. It wasn't what she said that dug into me. It was what she didn't. She never asked how he proposed. Never asked how I felt. Never once said, "Welcome to the family, Emily." In the weeks that followed, her involvement in the wedding planning grew like kudzu. Slow at first, then everywhere all at once. She suggested we move the ceremony to the country club where she was a member, because the church I liked was a bit too small town. She offered to pay for a more appropriate gown after seeing the simple dress I had circled in a catalog. She called the florist I had chosen and told her we would probably be going in a different direction. Every time she made a unilateral decision, she wrapped it in concern. I just want your day to be perfect. You'll thank me later when you see the photos. You're young, honey. You don't know how these things look from the outside yet. That was the refrain she kept coming back to. You're young. You don't know. You'll thank me when you're older. It wasn't until the invitations that I realized she hadn't stepped in to help. She had stepped in to take over. As I stood in our kitchen holding an invitation with the wrong date, I thought about every little moment leading up to that one. Every time I had swallowed my discomfort and told myself I was overreacting. Every time I had tried to interpret her control as care. Maybe she didn't mean any harm, I had told myself. Maybe this is just how mothers are. But my mother hadn't been like this. I didn't remember much, but I remembered this. She had always made space for me. Ellen, on the other hand, seemed determined to fill every inch of space herself. I looked at Daniel, then really looked at him. At the crease forming between his brows. At the way his jaw tightened as he held one of the invitations in his hand. He looked hurt, confused, but not surprised. Daniel, I said quietly, how many times has she done something like this to you? He didn't answer right away. More than I'd like to admit, he finally said. He set the invitation back in the box like it was something fragile and dangerous at the same time. I'll talk to her, he said. She can't change our wedding date without asking us. But the thing about people like Ellen is that they don't see what they're doing as wrong. They see it as necessary. I didn't know it then, but the invitations weren't just a mistake to be corrected. They were the opening move in a game I hadn't realized we were playing. A game where the stakes weren't flowers or venues or menu choices. They were much higher than that. The real question wasn't whether we would get the date changed back. The real question was simple, terrifying, and impossible to ignore. When forced to choose between his mother and his future wife, whose side would Daniel stand on? I would get my answer sooner than I ever expected. There's a particular kind of silence that creeps into a room when something irreversible has just happened. It's not loud or dramatic. It doesn't crash into your chest like heartbreak or fury. No, this silence is colder, quieter. It slips beneath your skin and settles there like a warning you can't quite decipher. That was the silence in our apartment after Ellen left. The box of invitations sat on our kitchen island like a monument to everything that had just detonated between us. Daniel was pacing. He does that when he's stressed. Long strides back and forth, one hand in his hair, muttering half-sentences under his breath. I sat on one of the bar stools, staring at the neat stacks of envelopes, each one stamped and sealed. Dozens of them. Already mailed. Already out there in the world, carrying a date we never approved. A date that wasn't ours. She can't do this, Daniel said for the third time. She can't. She already did, I whispered. He stopped pacing long enough to look at me. Really look at me. And the guilt in his eyes was so sharp I wanted to look away. I'm calling her, he said finally, grabbing his phone. I watched him dial, watched his shoulders tighten as he waited for her to answer. When she finally picked up, his voice shifted into that careful, controlled tone children use when they're trying not to start a fight with a parent. Mom, we need to talk about the invitations. I couldn't hear her voice, but I could hear the rhythm of her responses. Calm, self-assured, untouched by the chaos she'd caused. No, Daniel said firmly. You didn't run anything by us. We didn't approve that date. The venue was booked. Yes, because we chose it. Pause. No. Mom, listen. You crossed a line. Longer pause. Mom, stop. Stop. It's not your decision. Silence. Then his jaw clenched. He lowered the phone slowly, staring at it as if it had just insulted him. She hung up, he said. And in that moment something inside me, something small and fragile, cracked. He sank into the seat beside me. I'm so sorry, Em. It's not your fault, I said automatically, even though part of me was starting to wonder if that was entirely true. He had grown up like this. With a mother who made decisions for him, who dressed them up as care, who framed control as love. He was used to orbiting her gravity. I wasn't. Within 48 hours the fallout began. The first text came from one of Daniel's cousins. Got the invite. Can't do June 8th but hoping to make it work. I stared at it, my heart thudding. June 8th. The wrong date. Then came another message, from one of his aunts this time. We didn't know, plans changed. Is everything okay? You moving the wedding earlier. And then. It seems so sudden. We're surprised Daniel didn't tell us. Hope this wasn't a rushed decision. Rushed. Sudden. Not told. Ellen had done more than mail invitations. She had created a narrative. One where we looked disorganized. Impulsive. Maybe even unstable. And she had made sure it spread through the family like a controlled burn. Daniel tried calling her again. She didn't answer. He tried once more that evening. Straight to voicemail. I wish I could say I stayed calm. That I handled everything with grace and maturity. But the truth is, I felt something dark pressing against my ribs, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Fear. Not fear of losing him. Fear of losing myself in all of this. By the end of that week, his entire extended family thought the date change had been our decision. Ellen had told them she was helping, that I was overwhelmed, that young brides don't always see the bigger picture. And they believed her. Of course they did. She had built her reputation on competence, organization, authority. And I was a 23-year-old girl from Savannah who worked part-time at a bakery and liked simple things. To them, I was the kind of bride who needed guidance, not the kind who would lead. I heard whispers secondhand. She's too young. They should have waited. Ellen is just doing what any mother would do. But that wasn't true. It wasn't what any mother would do. It was what Ellen would do. And she hadn't even begun. One night, after another relative messaged us asking why we weren't keeping them in the loop, I sat on the couch with my knees pulled to my chest and whispered the question I had been avoiding. Daniel, if she keeps doing things like this, what happens when we're married? He froze. What do you mean? What happens when we have kids someday? My voice shook even though I tried to steady it. What happens when she wants to make decisions for them? Or for us? What happens when she disagrees with me or thinks she knows better? His face softened. He touched my knee gently. She'll get used to you. She just needs time. Time. A quiet, bitter laugh slipped out of me before I could stop it. Daniel. She changed the date of our wedding. He looked down, shame coloring his cheeks. I know. I know she crossed a line. And I'm going to fix it. I promise. But promises don't stop people like Ellen. Promises don't undo mail already sent. Promises don't rewrite the stories she was already carefully weaving behind our backs. A week after the invitations, she finally called back. Not Daniel. Me. I answered because I was tired of being afraid. Emily, she said in that same polished voice she always used. We seem to have had a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding. The word struck me like a slap. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even an acknowledgement. It was a dismissal. I didn't realize you felt so strongly about the original date, she continued. Had you told me you were attached to it emotionally, I wouldn't have intervened. Emotionally. Attached. Intervened. Every word was a trap. I don't want you making decisions for us, I said quietly. Well, I'm only trying to help, she replied. Weddings are stressful. And not everyone is naturally suited to planning one. You're very young, Emily. You'll understand someday. There was again. That reminder. That hierarchy. That quiet belittling disguised as wisdom. And I realized something in that moment. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a battle for control. A battle I wasn't going to win by being polite. After we hung up, Daniel found me sitting on the floor beside the couch, staring at nothing. I'm changing the date back, he said gently. I already called the venue. They'll do it. We'll send new invitations. I promise. I nodded, but my heart felt heavy. Because it wasn't about the date. Not anymore. It was the first time I said it out loud. She doesn't respect me. Daniel closed his eyes like the words physically hurt him. I know. And then came the words I dreaded most. But she's my mom. There was the tightrope he was stuck on. The impossible choice neither of us wanted him to make. In that moment I didn't know if he would ever step off that rope. I didn't know if he could. But I knew one thing with terrifying clarity. Ellen wasn't done. Not by a long shot. And the next time she tried to undermine me, I wouldn't be able to pretend it was anything less than intentional. Little did I know. Her next move would make the invitations look like child's play. There is a moment in every storm where you can feel the pressure shift. The air thickens. The light dims. The world holds its breath. That's what the weeks after the invitation disaster felt like. A long, uneasy inhale, the kind that warned you something worse was coming even if you couldn't yet see the clouds. And then, almost casually, Ellen began her second wave. This time she went after the wedding dress. I had always imagined choosing my dress with a small, intimate group. Maybe my best friend Lily, maybe my dad sitting stiffly in the corner pretending not to tear up. Nothing grand or elaborate, just a quiet moment where I felt like a bride for the first time. Instead, I ended up in a boutique surrounded by strangers, staring at a reflection I barely recognized. I had told Daniel I was going dress shopping that morning. He offered to come, but I shook my head. No, it's supposed to be a girl thing, I'd said. I want to do this one by myself. What I didn't tell him was that I wanted space from the chaos. Just a day where I could breathe without worrying about his mother's shadow lurking behind every detail. I had been in the boutique for 15 minutes, flipping absently through racks of lace and satin, when the door chimed behind me. And then I heard her voice. Emily. There you are. My entire body went rigid. She glided toward me, wearing a deep navy blouse and carrying a leather-bound planner like she was arriving for a business meeting. The sales associate smiled brightly, oblivious to the way my stomach dropped. Oh, I said, forcing a thin smile. I didn't know you were coming. Daniel told me, she replied simply. He mentioned you'd be here today. And choosing the dress is such an important moment. I couldn't imagine you doing it alone. She said it with such confidence that for half a second I wondered if I had imagined wanting privacy. Before I could suggest, gently, that I maybe preferred shopping alone, she looped her arm through mine and guided me toward a section of gowns that looked like they were made for royalty. These, she said, gesturing at the racks, are the dresses that photograph well. I blinked at the heavy beading, the full skirts, the yards of fabric that looked like they might swallow me whole. I was thinking something simpler, I said softly. She laughed. Not a cruel laugh, just dismissive. Oh honey. Simple is for second weddings and courthouse ceremonies. This is your one chance to make a statement. She pulled out a dress so large it required 2 hangers. Try this one. I'm not sure. Nonsense. It'll be stunning on you. I tried it on. It felt like drowning. The skirt weighed more than a toddler. The bodice squeezed my ribs like it was trying to reshape them. I stared at myself in the mirror, swallowed by layers of fabric, looking like a child playing dress-up in someone else's fantasy. I don't think this is me, I said, breathless. Ellen tilted her head. Well, not with that posture. Stand up straight. I straightened. The dress didn't get better. She pursed her lips, circling me like she was inspecting a sculpture for flaws. Maybe something with more structure. This one doesn't hide the hips as well. I felt heat crawl up my neck. The sales associate looked uncomfortable. I wanted to disappear. I changed out of the dress as quickly as I could, feeling my throat tighten. Ellen didn't seem to notice my unraveling. She kept pulling things. Heavier. Flashier. Whiter. Every dress she chose looked like it belonged on someone older, taller, louder. Someone who wasn't me. Finally, after the 4th gown, I said quietly, I really appreciate your help, but I'd like to look around by myself for a bit. She froze. Not dramatically, just enough to let me know I'd stepped onto thin ice. Of course, she said with a brittle smile. If that's what you want. But it wasn't what she meant. I wandered toward a quieter corner of the boutique, heart racing, wanting just a moment to breathe. I found a dress hanging by itself, soft ivory, delicate straps, light lace that looked like it belonged in a garden at dusk. It wasn't loud. It wasn't showy. It was me. I touched the fabric gently. Would you like to try that one? The associate asked. I nodded. When I slipped into it, something inside me settled. I didn't feel drowned. Or disguised. I felt like a bride. Like the girl Daniel had proposed to. Like the version of myself I still recognized. The associate smiled warmly. "This one suits you." I stared at my reflection, feeling a small, fragile joy bloom in my chest. And then the curtain pulled back. "Absolutely not," Ellen said. The joy vanished. She stepped into the fitting room area like she owned it. "That dress washes you out," she said. "It's far too plain. You'll regret choosing something so forgettable." "I love it," I whispered. "It's a mistake," she replied firmly. "You need something that makes an impression. People will be photographing you all night. This looks like a sundress." My throat burned. "This is the one I want." She blinked, taken aback by my certainty. "Oh, Emily," she said softly, patronizingly, "you're making decisions based on emotion. You'll thank me later." I turned away from her. "I'm getting it." Her expression cooled. "If that's the dress you choose," she said slowly, "then I won't be contributing to the cost." The dress cost less than half of the gowns she'd picked. It wasn't about money. It was about control. "I'm buying it myself," I said. And for the first time since I'd known her, Ellen looked offended. Personally offended. Like I'd rejected her, not the dresses. She left the boutique without another word. I stood there in the dress, trembling. Later that evening, Daniel came home with worry all over his face. "Mom called," he said quietly. "Of course she had. She said you refused her help. That you shut her out. That you were disrespectful." I closed my eyes. "She tried to force me into dresses I didn't want." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "She thinks you don't appreciate her involvement." "I don't want her involvement," I said, feeling my voice crack. "I want my wedding. I want my choices. I want space, Daniel." He sat beside me, pulling me into his arms. "I know," he said softly. "I'll talk to her again." But deep down I knew talking wasn't enough. Ellen wasn't trying to be helpful. She was trying to mold me into someone she thought was worthy of her son. Someone she could shape, adjust, direct. Someone who wasn't me. And the dress was only the beginning. Because the next thing she went after was the people invited to our wedding. There are moments in life when you feel the ground shift beneath your feet. Quietly, almost imperceptibly, until you realize you're no longer standing on solid earth but on something fragile, something that could break at any second. That's what the days after the dress incident felt like. Ellen had gone silent. Not angry silent. Not sulking silent. Strategic silent. And I would learn soon enough that Ellen never wasted silence. She used it. At first I thought maybe we had reached some kind of uneasy truce. That she was taking a step back, maybe reconsidering her approach. I told myself she might even be reflecting, cooling down, giving me space. I was wrong. She wasn't stepping back. She was working behind the scenes. The first hint came from an unexpected place. Daniel's cousin Lauren. She was one of the few people in his family who had reached out to me directly after the invitation fiasco, checking in, offering sympathy, saying things like, "She has strong opinions but she means well. Just give her time." Kind words. Kind woman. But 3 days after the dress incident she called me sounding uneasy. "Emily," she said, "I wasn't sure if I should tell you this, but I think you should know." "Know what?" I held my breath as she continued. "Aunt Ellen's been calling people. A lot of people." Something cold slid down my spine. What is she saying?" Lauren hesitated. And hesitation is almost always worse than the truth. She told some family members that the wedding might be postponed. Or possibly cancelled. Cancelled. I felt my pulse in my throat. What? Why would she say that? She said you seemed overwhelmed. Emotional. Uncertain. Lauren exhaled shakily. She said you were having second thoughts. Second thoughts. The words felt like they were scraping against my ribs. "I'm not," I whispered. "I've never said anything like that. Not to her. Not to anyone." "I know," she said. "That's why I'm calling. It didn't sound right to me. But people are talking. Talking. That was the thing about families like Daniel's. Tight-knit, traditional, woven together across years of shared stories and shared vacations and shared assumptions. Gossip moved fast. And when the source was Ellen, people didn't question it. They accepted it as fact. I thanked Lauren, hung up the phone and stared at the living room wall for a long time. Long enough for fear to turn into something heavier. Something sharper. A few hours later I got another text. This time from Daniel's aunt. Emily, sweetie, if you're feeling anxious about the wedding, please know we support whatever decision you make. Support. Anxious. Decision. I felt physically sick. Then another message from a different cousin. Your cold feet are totally normal. Happens to a lot of brides. Cold feet. My hands shook as I typed back. I don't have cold feet. I never said that. And then silence. The kind that's worse than words because it confirms something far uglier. They didn't believe me. They believed her. By evening I knew I couldn't avoid it anymore. Daniel came home with bags of takeout, smiling tiredly. I got your favorite. I didn't smile back. We need to talk, I said. His smile faded instantly. What happened? I told him everything. About Lauren's call, about the texts, about the rumors circulating like smoke from a fire someone else had lit. When I finished he looked stunned. She's calling people, he whispered. Saying the wedding might be cancelled? I nodded, feeling the pressure behind my eyes. Daniel, she's telling people I'm unstable. That I'm unsure. That I'm the problem. His jaw clenched. No, that's not, she couldn't have meant. Daniel, I said softly, cutting him off. She didn't misunderstand anything. She's doing this intentionally. He pressed his palms into his eyes, like he was trying to keep his head from splitting open. I'll call her, he said. But even before he reached for his phone, I knew how that conversation would go. We'd been here before. He'd call. She'd deflect. She'd deny. She'd twist. She'd cry. And he would walk away feeling guilty, not angry. But something was different this time. His mother wasn't just undermining me. She was undermining us. He dialed. She picked up quickly. I sat on the couch, clutching a pillow, listening to his side of the conversation. Mom, Emily told me what you said. Pause. No. Don't do that. Don't pretend you don't know what I'm talking about. Longer pause. Mom, did you call the family? Did you tell them the wedding might be cancelled? Silence. Then frustration. Then disbelief. Then anger. Stop. Stop it. His voice rose. This isn't helping. You're making everything worse. Another pause. No, she's not unstable. Why would you even say that? Then, Mom, you don't get to diagnose my fiancé. You don't get to create problems and then act like you're fixing them. And then the words I wasn't prepared for. If you keep doing this, I don't know how we move forward. I felt something inside me crack open. Something equal parts relief and heartbreak. When he hung up, he looked exhausted. She said she didn't mean it that way, he muttered. That she was just checking in with people. That she's worried about us. Worried. I wanted to laugh. Or scream. Or both. Instead I just said, she wants to control the story. He sank onto the couch beside me, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. For the first time since the engagement he looked afraid. He whispered, what if this is just how she is? What if it doesn't stop? I placed a shaky hand on his arm. Then we make it stop. But deep down I already knew the truth. People like Ellen didn't stop. They escalated. And I could feel it in my bones. The pressure in the air, the tightness in the atmosphere, the warning beneath every word. The storm wasn't coming. It was already here. And the next strike would hit closer than either of us expected. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that doesn't touch your body at all. Only your spirit. The kind that comes from knowing something is breaking and realizing you might not be able to fix it. That's what the next few days felt like. It wasn't just the phone calls anymore. It wasn't just the invitations or the dress. It was the way the air shifted every time Daniel's phone buzzed. The way he tensed before answering. The way my name slipped into his mother's voice like a blade coated in concern. After the rumor she'd started, his family treated me differently. Less warmth. More caution. Like I was a flight risk or worse, an emotional liability. And Daniel was caught between us, trying desperately to hold a rope that was fraying faster than he could manage. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening. One of those evenings that should have been forgettable, quiet, ordinary, but instead carved itself into my memory with perfect clarity. We were in the kitchen eating leftover pasta when his phone lit up on the counter. Daniel's shoulders immediately drew up. Don't answer if you don't want to, I said gently. He exhaled. No, I need to. She keeps saying it's urgent. He picked up the call. I tried not to listen. I failed. Mom, slow down. What are you talking about? Pause. No, she didn't say that. Pause. Mom, that's not what happened. Longer pause. Please stop twisting things. His voice was getting louder, more strained. I stood from the table. He turned his back to me, pressing a hand to his forehead. No, she didn't forbid you from helping with the wedding. He just, no. Mom, listen. She wants space because you've made decisions without asking. Pause. I know you meant well. But that's not the point. Pause. No. She's not unstable. Stop saying that. My heart clenched. Then I heard it, her voice coming faintly through the receiver, high and sharp. I didn't make out every word, but I made out enough. She's too young. She's emotional. You're making a mistake. You'll regret letting her isolate you. She's manipulating you, Daniel. You need to think clearly. Think clearly. As if loving me was some kind of lapse in judgment. Daniel closed his eyes like he physically couldn't listen anymore. Enough, he snapped. I said enough. He paused, breathing hard. No. Stop. I don't want to hear this. I love her. I'm marrying her. That's final. Another pause. I don't care if you approve. That's when she said something that made Daniel go still. Then stiffen. Then turn pale. He didn't repeat it. He didn't have to. Whatever she said had crossed a line I hadn't even known existed. He pulled the phone from his ear, hand trembling slightly, and ended the call mid-sentence. For a long moment he just stood there staring at the dark screen. I approached carefully like he was a wounded animal who might bolt. Daniel, I whispered. What did she say? He swallowed, rubbing the back of his neck. She said. He hesitated. I touched his hand. You can tell me. He exhaled shakily. She said she won't come to the wedding if things continue like this. My stomach dropped. Not because of the threat itself, but because of the way it hit him. This wasn't a casual ultimatum. This was his mother, the woman who raised him, the woman who'd been his constant, saying she would rather miss her son's wedding than treat me with respect. That's a choice she can make, I said softly. He looked at me, eyes full of pain. She's still my mom. I know. And I love her. I know. And she's tearing us apart. My voice broke a little. I know. He leaned against the counter like the weight of everything had finally cracked his spine. This wasn't supposed to happen, he whispered. This was supposed to be the happiest time of our lives. I stepped closer. Daniel, I don't want you to choose between us. But he shook his head. I do. Have to. She made sure of that. Silence settled over us, heavy and dense. Then he reached for my hands, carefully like he was afraid I might slip away. Emily, he said quietly, I need you to hear me. I'm choosing you. I'm marrying you. And if she can't accept that, then that's her loss. Relief washed through me, but not without a sting of guilt. Because as much as I wanted him on my side, I knew what it cost him. What if she never talks to you again? I whispered. He shook his head. She will. Eventually. He always does. But she has to understand she doesn't get to run my life anymore. I nodded, letting his words sink into me. He was choosing our marriage. Our future. But something inside me knew better than to believe this was the end of it. People like Ellen didn't retreat when they were confronted. They regrouped. They recalculated. And they struck back with precision. As we stood there holding each other, trying to steady ourselves, I felt it again. The storm building, gathering strength in the quiet. Because if there was one thing I was beginning to understand, Ellen wasn't done fighting. And the next battle would happen on the night of the rehearsal dinner, in front of an audience she couldn't control. There's a moment in every long fight when you stop flinching and start preparing. Not because the blows hurt any less, but because you finally understand the pattern. By the time the rehearsal dinner approached, I understood Ellen's pattern perfectly. Whenever she felt her control slipping, she created chaos. Quiet, subtle chaos. Whispers. Doubts. Small stories that grew legs and wandered from ear to ear until they sounded like truth. But something in me had changed. Fear had turned into resolve. Confusion had sharpened into clarity. And the part of me that used to shrink in her presence had finally begun to stand up. She had used the invitations. She had used the dress. She had used the family. Now she would try to use the rehearsal dinner. I could feel it. And for the first time I wasn't afraid of what she'd do next. I was ready for it. It began 3 days before the dinner. A text from Daniel's Aunt Karen popped up on my phone. Looking forward to the rehearsal. Ellen said there might be some changes to the schedule. Just let us know when to be there. Changes. To the schedule. I stared at the message, pulse quickening. Daniel walked into the room just as the phone buzzed again. Heard the dinner might be moved to the club instead? Is the pastor still coming, or did Ellen say he couldn't make it? We'll follow whatever Ellen decides, just keep us posted. Follow whatever Ellen decides. That was all I needed to read. Daniel saw my expression and froze. What happened? I handed him the phone. He read the messages, face tightening with each one. And when he finished, he whispered, "Oh my God, she's doing it again." Yes, she was. "This isn't a misunderstanding," I said quietly. "She's trying to take over the rehearsal. And if she controls the rehearsal, she controls the wedding." He sank into a chair, running a hand through his hair. "I'll call her." But for the first time since this all began, I reached out and took his wrist gently. "No," I said. "Let me." He looked startled. She won't listen to you." "That's okay," I replied. "I'm not calling to convince her of anything." He swallowed. "Then what are you calling for?" I met his eyes. "To let her talk. So she can't deny it later. Because if Ellen had taught me anything over the past months, it was this. She thrived in the shadows. She thrived in the unrecorded. She thrived in the vague. And the rehearsal dinner would be the first time the entire family would be in the same room, seeing the same truth. I needed them to walk into that room already knowing who she really was. So I made a plan. A simple one. Not revenge. Not sabotage. Just truth. The first step was gathering proof. I went back through messages. From relatives, from vendors, from people Ellen had helped. I screenshotted everything. The florist. "Your Emil said you'd changed your mind about the arrangements." The pastor. "Ellen informed me a new rehearsal date had been chosen." Daniel's uncle. "We heard you might postpone due to nerves. Hope you're okay." Over and over again her fingerprints were everywhere. Layers of manipulation disguised as concern. I wasn't planning to use the screenshots publicly, not yet. Just enough to show Daniel the magnitude of what she had done. When I finished organizing the messages, I turned to him. "Do you want to see?" He hesitated, then nodded. And as he scrolled, his expression shifted from shock to disbelief, to anger, to something far more painful. Betrayal. "She did all of this," he whispered. "Behind our backs." "Yes. And she lied to everyone." "Yes. And she said it was because she was trying to help." "Yes." He closed the phone slowly. "I'm done protecting her," he said. "She made her choice." But I shook my head gently. "No, Daniel. Not yet." He frowned. "Why not?" "Because if we confront her now," I said softly, "she'll twist it. She'll cry. She'll make you feel guilty. She'll make me look dramatic or manipulative. So what do? We wait." "For what?" "For the rehearsal dinner." He blinked. "And everyone will be there." "Yes," I said. "That's the point." He stared at me for a long moment. Then he nodded. Not because he liked the plan, but because he finally understood Ellen the way I did. People like her didn't stop when you confronted them quietly. They stopped when there was nowhere left to hide. The next 3 days were tense. Ellen didn't contact us. Daniel didn't contact her. His family remained confused, whispering among themselves. But I stayed calm. For the first time since our engagement, I felt in control. The night before the rehearsal, Daniel lay beside me, staring at the ceiling. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly. I took his hand. "I'm sure about you." He turned his head, eyes softening. "I hate that she's put us in this position," he said. "I know. And I hate that this is happening right before the wedding." "I know. And I hate that the woman who raised me is the same woman who is doing this to you." My voice was gentle when I answered. "Daniel, she's not doing this to me." He frowned. "Then who?" "To us." He closed his eyes. "You're right," he whispered. Then quieter. "I'm scared, Em." "For what?" "That after tomorrow, I won't recognize her anymore." I squeezed his hand. Then tomorrow, I said, you'll finally see her clearly. The next day we drove to the rehearsal dinner together. My heart pounded. Daniel's hand trembled slightly in mine. But for the first time I wasn't scared of Ellen. I wasn't afraid of her opinion. Or her power. Or her stories. Because the truth was coming. And truth, even when messy, even when painful, has a way of breaking open every lie around it. Tomorrow she would stand in front of her entire family. And she would finally face the consequences of her own choices. The storm wasn't on the horizon anymore. It was waiting for her. Right inside the rehearsal hall. Rehearsal dinners are supposed to feel like a warm-up for the happiest day of your life. Soft lighting, clinking glasses, whispered toasts, people leaning close over tables and saying things like, "Can you believe the wedding is tomorrow?" Ours felt like walking into a courtroom where I was both the defendant and the only person who knew the verdict was already written. The moment Daniel and I stepped into the private room at the restaurant, a hush rippled through his family, subtle but unmistakable. Conversations paused. Eyes flicked toward us, then away. Several aunts glanced at me with tight, polite smiles, the kind you reserve for someone you've already been warned about. Whispers travel fast in families like his. Truth travels slower. Ellen was standing near the head of the table, wearing a pale lavender blouse that made her look serene and harmless, the emotional equivalent of a soft floral wallpaper pattern. Her hair was perfectly curled. Her pearls gleamed. And the moment she saw us, she smiled with the practiced warmth of a politician greeting a crowd she needed to charm. "Daniel." "Emily," she said brightly, stepping forward. But Daniel didn't smile back. He didn't hug her. He didn't even soften. He said quietly, "Mom." Her eyes flicked to our hands still clasped tightly. And something sharp flashed behind her pleasant expression. The room filled quickly, cousins, aunts, uncles, grandparents. People I barely knew, people who already knew too much about me. The pastor arrived. The restaurant staff brought out glasses of sparkling water and trays of appetizers. Everything looked beautiful, peaceful. But there was a tension humming beneath the surface, like a wire pulled too tight. Daniel and I sat at the long table side by side. Ellen settled across from us, close enough to study every shift in our expression. She laughed politely at small talk, made comments about the decor, praised the venue. Not once did she mention the chaos she had created. Not once did she apologize. Not once did she even acknowledge that anything was wrong. She was waiting. Watching. Waiting for the perfect moment to regain control. But I was waiting too. The rehearsal began. Practice vows, walking order, timing. The pastor gave instructions. The bridal party cracked a few nervous jokes. To anyone on the outside it probably looked normal. But I could feel the storm gathering. I could feel Ellen preparing to strike. And then she did. It happened as soon as the pastor announced we were finished and asked if anyone had final thoughts or questions. Ellen cleared her throat. A small sound. Soft. Polite. And instantly the entire room fell quiet. She stood slowly, gracefully, like she'd been rehearsing this moment in her mirror. "I just wanted to say something," she began, her voice warm, gentle, deceptively calm. "Oh no." Daniel stiffened beside me. "I know the past few months have been challenging," she continued, "with emotions running high and misunderstandings happening on all sides." Misunderstandings. I felt my jaw tighten. "I just want to assure everyone," she said, placing a hand over her heart, "that I have only ever wanted the best for my son and his future wife." Future wife. Not Emily. Not me. A title. Role. A placeholder. She looked directly at me then, smiling softly as if she were offering an olive branch. "I know weddings can overwhelm young brides," she said, "and sometimes decisions feel heavier than they should. But I'm hopeful that tonight we can all let go of the tension and focus on what truly matters: Dan's happiness." Dan. Not Daniel. Not the grown man sitting beside me. Dan, the little boy she still believed belonged to her. A ripple of murmured agreement traveled through the room. People nodded. People sighed with relief. People smiled at her bravery, her grace, her willingness to rise above. She was positioning herself as the hero of the story. Me. The emotional young bride who needed guidance. I felt a tremor inside my chest, not of fear but of clarity. This was the moment. The moment I had been preparing for. Before Ellen could sit back down, I rose to my feet. Every head turned toward me. Forks paused midair. The room seemed to inhale all at once. I didn't speak loudly. I didn't need to. "Thank you, Ellen," I said softly. "But I think there's something everyone here deserves to know." Her smile faltered, the smallest crack. But I saw it. Daniel reached for my hand under the table. I squeezed his fingers once. "I've heard a lot in the past few weeks," I continued. "Rumors. Concerns. Questions about whether the wedding would even happen." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Ellen's shoulders tensed. "And I want to be very clear," I said, my voice steady. "I have never once expressed doubts about marrying Daniel. Not to anyone. Not for a moment." People shifted uncomfortably. Several relatives looked at one another in confusion. "So if you heard something different," I continued, "it didn't come from me." Silence. Real silence. Heavy and cold. I could feel Ellen's gaze drilling into me, but I didn't look at her yet. Instead, I scanned the room, meeting the eyes of the people who had whispered, who had worried, who had believed. "I know many of you got calls," I said gently. "Calls suggesting I was overwhelmed. Or unstable. Or unsure. Some of you were told the date changed because of me. Or that I was having second thoughts." The pastor shifted in his seat. Several cousins looked startled, guilty. "And none of that," I said, "was true." Finally, I turned to her. "Ellen." Poised. Elegant. Exposed. "Ellen," I said quietly, "if you have concerns about me, I wish you had come to me directly instead of going to everyone else." A visible jolt went through the room. Daniel breathed out slowly, like he'd been holding his breath for hours. His mother stared at me, her face still calm, but her knuckles had turned white where they gripped her napkin. "I've made mistakes," I admitted to the room. "I'm young. I'm learning. But I know what love looks like. And I know what respect looks like." I paused. And changing our wedding date without telling us wasn't respect. A few gasps. Ellen blinked. "Just once. And calling relatives to suggest I might cancel the wedding," I added gently, "wasn't respect either." Aunt Karen covered her mouth. Uncle Mark frowned in confusion. Lauren looked relieved. Finally, the truth spoken aloud. "I don't want conflict," I said softly. "I don't want sides. I want family. I want honesty. I want peace." My voice didn't shake once. But peace doesn't come from pretending nothing happened. I looked directly at Ellen. "It comes from accountability." The room felt frozen, every emotion suspended in the air. Ellen opened her mouth, finally, to speak. But before she could form a word, Daniel stood up beside me. And what he said next would change everything. When Daniel stood beside me, the entire room shifted. The tension that had been pulsing quietly beneath the surface rose up like a wave, sharp, electric, impossible to ignore. Every fork lowered. Every whisper died. Every pair of eyes in that warm, candlelit room fixed on him with a mixture of shock and expectation. But as Daniel never made scenes. He was the calm one. The reasonable one. The let's think this through one. So when he stood, when he squared his shoulders, when he looked at his mother with an expression I had never seen on his face before, a mixture of disappointment, hurt, and something close to finality, the entire room held its breath. "Mom," he said softly, "I need to say something too." Ellen lifted her chin just slightly. Not defiant. Defensive. "Daniel," she started, her voice already heavy with wounded dignity, "this isn't." "Mom," he repeated, stronger now, cutting her off. "Please. Let me speak." The request wasn't angry. It wasn't disrespectful. It was heartbreaking. Because for the first time in his life, Daniel wasn't asking for permission. He was claiming the floor. Now, he recognized it. She fell silent. "I've listened," Daniel began, his voice trembling with emotion he didn't bother hiding. "I've been trying to make sense of everything. I've tried to believe that every misunderstanding had good intentions behind it. That the calls, the date change, the rumors, you didn't mean to hurt us." He swallowed hard. "But Mom, the truth is everything you've done has hurt us." A ripple moved through the room. Sympathy. Validation. Ellen's eyes widened, but she kept her expression carefully composed. "I know you think Emily is young," he continued, "and I know you think you're protecting me, but you're not. You're hurting me. And you're hurting her. And you're hurting us." A quiet gasp came from someone near the back. I didn't look to see who. And the hardest part, Daniel went on, voice breaking, is that I didn't see it at first. I didn't want to see it. Because you're my mom. You've always been the person I trusted most. Ellen blinked rapidly. Her breathing changed. The first cracks in her polished exterior began to show. But Emily hasn't lied to me. Not once, Daniel said. She hasn't manipulated me. She hasn't gone behind anyone's back. She hasn't created drama. His gaze swept the room, making sure everyone heard the next part. She has been honest, kind, patient, and she's tried harder than she should have had to. My heart tightened. I felt suddenly small and seen at the same time. Daniel turned back to his mother. But you... His voice caught. He tried again. But you crossed lines, Mom. And I kept letting it go because I thought it was easier that way. Silence swallowed the room like a tide. But it wasn't easier. It was cowardly. Ellen inhaled sharply. Her first visible reaction. I've allowed you to speak for me, he said. I've allowed you to make decisions for us. I've allowed you to tell our family things that weren't true. Someone whispered, "Oh my God," from across the table. And I can't do that anymore. Ellen's composure finally cracked. Daniel, she whispered, voice trembling, I was trying to help. I know, he interrupted gently. And I love you. God, I love you. You're my mom. But loving you doesn't mean letting you control me. His hands were shaking now. And loving Emily means protecting her. Even if it means protecting her from you. You could have heard a pin drop. Ellen stared at him, eyes glistening, hurt, disbelief, and something proud fighting inside her like two storms colliding. Do you really think, she whispered, voice tight, that I would ever try to hurt you? Daniel nodded. Once. Fully. Painfully. Yes, he said. Not on purpose. But yes. Her breath caught in her throat. He continued, softer now but no less firm. This is our life. Our wedding. Our marriage. And I need you to respect that. I need you to respect her. If you can't, then you won't be part of tomorrow. Or the days after. A shudder went through the room. Ellen's lips parted in shock. Her fingers trembled around her napkin. Her eyes filled with tears, not controlled and dignified but real. Raw. Human. She looked at me then. Really looked at me. Not the girl she thought was stealing her son. Not the child she assumed didn't know what she was doing. Not the threat she imagined. Just me. Emily. The woman her son loved. And for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. Fear of losing him. Fear of being the villain. Fear of the truth finally catching up to her. Daniel, she whispered, her voice shaking. I didn't realize. He nodded gently. I know. I didn't know I was hurting you, she said again, quieter this time. I thought I was helping. Daniel exhaled, the anger softening into something tired and fragile. I know, Mom. But this stops now. Ellen closed her eyes, pressing a trembling hand to her chest. And then, in front of her entire family, with every whisper and rumor floating between them like ghosts, she said the words I never thought I would hear. I'm sorry. It wasn't loud. It wasn't grand. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. And when she opened her eyes again, they weren't the eyes of a woman trying to win a war. They were the eyes of a mother who'd finally realized she was losing her son. The room exhaled all at once. And for the first time in months, the storm began to break. But the wedding day was still ahead. And the hardest part of the story, the part that would define everything that came after, was still to come. There are mornings you never forget. Not because they're perfect, but because they feel so fragile. You're afraid to breathe too deeply. And crack the moment open. My wedding day was one of those mornings. Savannah dawned soft and golden, the way it always does after a storm. The air smelled like magnolia and wet earth. Light spilled gently through the hotel curtains, brushing everything in the room with a glow that felt unreal, almost holy. My dress hung near the window. The simple, delicate gown Ellen hated. And I loved. With every piece of myself. I slipped into it slowly, savoring the quiet, the stillness, the trembling anticipation in my chest. My hands shook only once, when I touched the straps. Not out of fear. Out of awe. Because somehow, after everything, I had made it to this moment. Daniel's mother hadn't spoken to us after the rehearsal dinner. Not angrily. Not dramatically. Just silently. But not the calculating silence she used before. This was different. Hidden. Wounded. Reflective. No one knew if she would show up at the ceremony. Even Daniel didn't know. And I had made peace with whatever choice she made. He came. Fine. He didn't. Also fine. The wedding wasn't about her. Not anymore. When the photographer arrived, snapping photos of me adjusting my earrings, my bouquet, my veil, I felt a strange calm settle into my bones. For months I had carried a heaviness. Fear, pressure, doubt. But today, none of it belonged to me. Today was mine. My bridesmaids whispered and fussed over me, offering compliments and tissues and nervous laughter. Lily, my best friend, pulled me aside before we left the room. "You ready?" she asked. I nodded. I've never been more ready for anything. Outside the venue the world felt brighter. The flowers were vibrant. The music soft. Guests filtered into rows of white chairs under the sprawling live oaks draped in Spanish moss. I didn't scan the crowd for Ellen. I didn't need to. She was here, she was here. If she wasn't, the sun would still shine. The ceremony began. Bridesmaids. Groomsmen. Parents. Pastor. And then, a shift. A rustle. A quiet murmur drifting through the seated guests like a breeze touching every shoulder. I looked up. Ellen was walking down the aisle. Not in dramatic fashion. Not seeking attention. Not demanding anything. She walked alone, wearing a soft blue dress. Not flashy, not commanding. Just appropriate. She took her seat quietly, folding her hands in her lap. But what struck me most was her face. She looked smaller. Softer. Human in a way she hadn't allowed herself to look before. And for the first time she didn't look at me with superiority or suspicion. She looked at me with something closer to remorse. My breath trembled. Just once. But then the music changed. And the doors opened. And there was Daniel. Standing at the end of the aisle. Eyes shining. Heart open. Everything I had fought so hard to protect standing right in front of me. As I walked toward him, nothing else existed. Not the whispers. Not the past. Not the tension or the scars or the messy, tangled journey that had brought us here. Just him. Just us. Just this moment. The vows were simple. Honest. True. Daniel's voice wavered when he said, "I choose you today and every day after." Mine cracked when I whispered, "You are my home." And when the pastor finally pronounced us husband and wife, I felt the world settle into place. The reception was a blur of laughter, dancing, clinking glasses. People hugged me, complimented the ceremony, apologized quietly for believing rumors, for listening to the wrong voice, for underestimating me. I didn't hold grudges. Not today. Today wasn't meant for bitterness. But the moment I will never forget, the one burned into my memory forever, came as the music softened and the crowd shifted. Ellen approached me, slowly, carefully, like I was a fragile thing she wasn't sure she deserved to touch. "Emily," she said, her voice barely a whisper. I turned to face her fully. She stared at me for a long time. Long enough that the noise of the reception blurred into a distant hum. Then she said the words I didn't expect, didn't ask for, but somehow needed more than I knew. "You were right." My breath hitched. She swallowed, eyes shining. "I thought I was helping. I thought I was protecting him. I didn't realize," her voice cracked. "I didn't realize I was hurting both of you." I didn't speak. I let her continue. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Truly. Deeply. I was wrong. And I hope someday, you can forgive me." Something inside me loosened. A knot I had been carrying for months. "I don't need perfection," I said softly. "Just honesty." Ellen's eyes filled with tears. "Then I'll give you that," she whispered. For the first time since I had met her. She looked at me not as an obstacle. Not as a rival. Not as a girl stealing her son. She looked at me as family. Daniel appeared beside me, taking my hand. Ellen looked at him too. Really looked. And nodded once, as if giving him permission to let go of her expectations and live his own life. "I'm proud of you," she said quietly. "Both of you." And for a moment, just a moment, I saw the mother Daniel had always believed her to be. The mother she still had the chance to become. As the night faded into soft lights and laughter. As we danced under the moss-draped oaks. As the world felt full and warm and possible. I realized something with absolute clarity. This wedding wasn't the end of a battle. It was the beginning of something new. A new family. A new chapter. A new chance for all of us to do better. But the real transformation, the real reckoning, came after the wedding was over. And the next morning brought consequences that would change Ellen's life forever. The morning after the wedding felt unreal. Soft sunlight creeping across the sheets. Daniel's arm warm around my waist. The echo of laughter still ringing somewhere in my bones. For the first time in months, I felt weightless. I thought the story had ended. I thought the storm had passed. I thought Ellen's apology at the reception was the final page. I was wrong. The consequences of everything she had done, every secret call, every rumor, every manipulation, were only just beginning to unfold. And none of them came from me. It started at breakfast. Daniel and I were sitting in the hotel's courtyard, sharing a plate of fruit and pastries, when his cousin Lauren approached us with a hesitant smile. "Hey," she said softly. "Mind if I sit?" "Of course," I said. She sat across from us, fidgeting with the edge of her napkin. "I wanted to tell you something," she continued. "Something that happened after you two left last night." Daniel and I exchanged a glance. Lauren leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "There was a conversation," she said, "between your mom and the rest of the family." Daniel stiffened. "What kind of conversation?" Lauren sighed. "The kind she couldn't talk her way out of." I listened quietly as she explained. After the reception ended, Ellen had tried to clarify things with several relatives. The same ones she had called in the weeks before the wedding. The ones she had misled. The ones she had manipulated. But they had watched the rehearsal dinner. They had heard Daniel. They had listened to my words. And they had seen the truth with their own eyes. "So, what happened?" I asked. Lauren exhaled slowly. "They confronted her." My pulse quickened. Not out of satisfaction, but out of disbelief. "What did they say?" Daniel asked. "That she'd crossed a line," Lauren replied. "A big one. That she'd embarrassed herself. Embarrassed the family. And that if she ever wanted to rebuild trust, she'd have to start being honest." Daniel's face softened with a mix of relief and sadness. "She didn't take it well at first," Lauren added gently. "You know how she is. She tried to defend herself. Tried to say she was misunderstood. But nobody bought it. Not this time." She hesitated before continuing. "She cried." Daniel inhaled sharply. He wasn't used to hearing that. "They told her she'd pushed too hard," Lauren said. "That she needed to give you both space now. Real space. The kind you choose, not the kind she tries to control." I felt something settle in my chest. Not joy. Not triumph. Something softer, fragile. Accountability. The one thing she'd never faced. "And there's more," Lauren added. Daniel leaned forward. "What?" "She told them she feels ashamed." Silence washed over our little table. Not defeated. Not angry. A word I'd never imagined would belong to Ellen. Lauren reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You didn't break the family, Emily," she said. "You saved the truth. And honestly, a lot of us needed to see it." My throat tightened. "I never wanted to hurt her," I whispered. "I know," Lauren said. "That's why it worked." After she left, Daniel and I sat quietly for a long moment. He finally spoke. "I don't know what's going to happen with her now." I rested my head on his shoulder. "You don't have to know today." He nodded slowly. "She needs time," I said softly. "And space." Then I added, "and help. The real kind. Not the kind she tries to force on everyone else." He let out a shaky breath. "She said she wanted to do better," he murmured. "I hope she means it." "She will," I said. "She has no choice now." His family had held her accountable. We had held our boundaries. The truth had been spoken. Publicly. Without cruelty. And for the first time, Ellen had to face her own reflection. Not the polished version she'd spent years curating, but the truth. A few hours later, she texted us. Daniel read it aloud. "I know I've been wrong. I'm going to give you both the space you need. I hope one day you'll let me earn a place in your life again. I love you." He looked up at me, eyes misty. "This is new," he whispered. And it was. For the first time, Ellen wasn't demanding. Or defending. Or pretending. She was accepting consequences she had created with her own actions. And that, more than any apology, was the beginning of real change. In the months that followed, Ellen started therapy. She called less often but with more sincerity. She asked questions instead of making decisions. She apologized again, privately, gently, without an audience. She slowly rebuilt trust with her family. And she rebuilt something with me too. Not a friendship, not yet, but a fragile, honest beginning. Daniel and I built a life together that felt ours. Untouched. Sacred. Stronger because of everything we had endured. And sometimes late at night I thought about that girl I used to be. The one who was so afraid of losing the wedding to Ellen's control. So afraid of being seen as too young. Too emotional. Too small. She had no idea the strength she would find. Not through revenge. Not through anger. But through truth. Through choosing herself. Through choosing Daniel. Through choosing love that wasn't loud, but steady. My wedding didn't ruin my relationship with my mother-in-law. It saved it. By breaking the way we used to dance around each other. Tiptoeing, avoiding, pretending. And forcing us both to choose something better. Honesty. Boundaries. Respect. And in the end, the real price Ellen paid was letting go of control. So she could earn something far more precious. A family she didn't command, but belonged to. And a daughter-in-law, who finally saw her, not as an enemy, but as a woman learning, just like me,